Hey, welcome to Bring It In, TrueHoop's daily show where we talk all things basketball and others. And we're hoping to welcome a dear friend of mine named Coach Stan Jones, the associate head coach of Florida State. But he's a little older than me and I think struggling still to figure out Zoom. So until then, we have our typical guest, Jarod, here. How's it going, Jarod?
I'm well, Coach. How are you? How's the weather in Florida today? Not great up here in New York, I'll say that.
Oh, I mean, it rained a lot this morning, and I think we're going to be blessed with like 75 to tomorrow. Normally it's
Mm-mm-mm.
80s this time of year. So yeah, as Henry knows, you don't want to talk to me about weather. You guys live up north. My air conditioning's on in my office. What does that tell you?
Yeah, it's rainy and I don't even know. Maybe 50 something today. It's terrible.
So we are missing Henry today. He's got some things he's got to take care of, which is why I asked to speak to my buddy Coach Jones. Hopefully he'll be with us soon. Gerard, so you live in New York
I do.
and you live in the city.
Hmm.
Uh, those of us who don't live in a very urban environment, it's easy for us to deal with the quarantine. We're not. I'm not screaming about any protest stuff because we've got plenty of room to roam around and not. I mean, when I go walking every day, I don't really pass many people at all. What's it like when you're in the middle of it?
It's so interesting you mentioned that because this city isn't really designed for that, right, Coach? There's 8 million people live here, so and we're packed on top of each other. So when you're forced to stay inside, it's problematic. And then when you have, of course, people who don't want to do that and obey those regulations, you have this sort of convergence of everyone flocking on sidewalks. It was last Friday. I was walking the dog because that's really all I go outside for, is to walk the dog, and that's about it. I'm like, it looked like a typical Friday night. I'm like, where are you people going? There's no restaurants open. There's no bars. What is happening right here? But people just want to do what they want to do, and it's as Randy said, everything that is great about New York City is terrible during a pandemic.
Right.
It is
It's
true.
not. Yeah. It's not a great place to be in a pandemic. My dad turned 80 yesterday, and we did a Zoom call last night. And one of my brothers lives in Miami, and he and his wife are doctors there, and it's not great in Miami. They're dealing with stuff all the time. It's a more spread out city than New York City, but still,
Hmm.
they've been hit pretty good. So for anyone that's just going to chime in on the video, you're welcome to click the chat button and ask questions while Gerard and I speak about a few different things. When I talk to Coach Jones, Gerard, I'm going to talk about what are the many things I'm going to talk to him about. It's going to be this latest thing of G League players, of college, potential college stars as they leave high school, signing contracts with the G League, right? And I'm interested to hear Coach Jones's take. They have one of the top players in the country coming to them, almost for sure lottery pick for the 2021 draft. And Stan has talked to me about the difference between the schools that are competing for national championships every year, right?
Hmm.
And then everybody else, and how it's, there's rules like, for example, grad transfers, where if you graduate early, you can transfer at no penalty. Schools like Florida State get rich on that because who doesn't want to potentially play for a title your last year and come to the expense of others? But how would you see the best way we can accommodate the preps to pros before the NBA just says, all right, come on in, like they did for a few years?
Yeah. I mean, this is a topic that is so near and dear to my heart, just mainly because I'm about fairness, right? And if the whole point is that you have athletes who are generating a certain amount of revenue, right, based on their skill set and what have you, they should be able to earn, right, fair market value for what it is that they're providing. Now, of course, a scholarship and those types of things are value, but it is not equivalent to what their output actually is, right? When you look at what it costs the school for that, it is way less than that actual dollar amount you see on your tuition and your bill because of the money they get funneled in from the NCAA. So for me, look, I'm fine with the NCAA existing as what it is. I love the G League as an option, the pathway program. I love overseas professional as an option because here's the bottom line. A player can decide and figure out what is my true market value based on what I can do. And if I can get that, then it's good. The NCAA's problem is is that they want to suppress your market value, right? They collude together and they say, yeah, no, we don't want to pay you what you're actually worth, right? We want to give you
Right.
less. So I'm not a fan of that.
Great. And I am very, very happy. I think Coach Jones, you're on mute. There you go. You're good. We've got Coach Jones here. Jarod, please stay on with us. But understand that Coach Jones and I, we've got a shorthand we can speak. I go way, way back with this gentleman. And for people who don't follow college basketball closely, because normally we're talking NBA, Coach Jones was in the inaugural class that they created for the Assistant Coach Hall of Fame for college basketball. He's been the associate head coach at Florida State for 18 years. He and I go back to when he was just a 2-letter coach. He was a high school coach and a Hall of Fame coach from the state of Tennessee. He played at Memphis State back then. He became a great coach there. Then he went to a 4-letter coach when he became an assistant coach at Miami with Leonard Hamilton in the Big East, where I think they won, in 4 years, they won one Big East championship regular season. And then he became a 3-letter coach when he went to the NBA for a year with the Wizards. And then he went to Mississippi State and then Florida State with Coach Hamilton. So at Mississippi State, he won an SEC league tournament title. I witnessed it in Atlanta every day.
Yep.
As you remember, we ate most nights together. And then and now at Florida State, they've really got it rolling where it's one of the best programs in the country. So Coach Jones, welcome to Bring It In.
I appreciate you guys, and I'm humbled and honored anytime somebody asks me to be a part of their journey.
I know you love saying that and writing that. It's so classic you. You're a very humble guy, and I appreciate that in you, Coach. But first of all, how are things? I don't know if you have any players left in Tallahassee. Last time we spoke, you had maybe 1 or 2. Is anyone left, or are they all back at home? And how's everyone doing?
A couple of them are back, or have been here the whole time. Trent Forrest, Dominic Olenichik, our seniors have been hanging around, kind of handling all their business with agent setups and all the stuff we've been helping them with. Raekwon Gray has stayed here because he's trying to really work hard on maintaining his not maintaining, but trying to develop his body a little bit. And if he goes back home, he was afraid he would gain a lot of weight and stuff in the comfortable confines of his mother's house. And some of our walk-on guys have actually come back in town this weekend just because they are actually graduating this weekend. Even though there's not a graduating ceremony, they're still kind of going to be in town for whatever little get-together they can have between themselves. So it's just a really weird time in our lifetimes. It's hard to figure out each day, and this new world through technology, as you can see this morning, sometimes can be a struggle.
I made a joke. I said, you're even older than me. So, we have to figure this kind of stuff out. Coach, so we met many, many years ago at a camp called 5-Star Basketball Camp. I believe you were there the week I was there when Bob McKillop, who was Steph Curry's coach, was coaching there. Were you there? Was that okay?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was
Bob
Long
was
Island Lutheran.
Yeah.
Long Island.
So this was Jarod. This was a very famous camp. They had many, many future NBA players that would go through there, but it was also famous for coaches. Bob Knight and Hubie Brown were 2 of the real originators of the camp, and for me, I was in my mid-20s. Coach Jones was already a very famous high school coach from Tennessee, and it was a chance for those of us that were really serious about the game to talk basketball all the time. What are some of your early memories, Coach, of not just you and I first meeting, but just what it was like to coach and kind of cut your teeth against the top coaches in the country?
Well, back in those days, as you and I both know, I mean, it wasn't just a place where the players went to prove themselves and to get their rankings. That was a place that if you were going to make it in the coaching business, you had to prove yourself there. You had to prove you could teach. You had to prove you could compete. You had to prove yourself that you could rub shoulders with the great college coaches, the great high school coaches, and in front of Mr. Garfinkel. That he was a guy at that time that was, I hate to use the word, but he was kind of a power broker for coaches,
no doubt.
maybe more so than players. And he was, if you could prove yourself with him, you had a chance of making it. And it was just a great learning laboratory for you to find new ways to make yourself better. And I'll never forget I think I worked the camp a year before you came. And I remember the first day I was coming from a little small private school in Memphis, Tennessee. And that first day I was walking around, and I had the first pick in the draft. And I had not got there in time for the draft because I was bringing some kids from Memphis that they wanted me to bring to camp.
Right.
So I got in real late, so I had to be in there that next morning. Didn't even know who was on my team. Bob Gibbons had actually drafted my team for me. I had Livingston Chapman and Jay Edwards, that played at Indiana, was on my team.
Yeah. Chapman
And
played at Florida from Lakeland, Kathleen. I remember Boot. Exactly. They called him Boot. Yeah.
And so I get there that first day, and I got a station. I get in like 3 o'clock in the morning and got stations the next morning. And I'm in the station group with Larry Davis, Jerry Wainwright, and Bill Donlin Sr. And I'm the fourth guy in that rotation.
Wow.
And when I got through that first day of camp, I could not sleep because I had not sat down the whole day because I was intimidated that I would look bad if I'd ever sat down there today. So that was my first day experience to the 5-star. But that's kind of the way you had to compete as a coach, just like players had to compete.
No, that's exactly right. We would stay up X and O and all night, and like we would have hour-long arguments. Not Coach Jones and I, but actually it was me and Kevin Sutton, who's a college coach now. We would argue over triple threat, how best to teach it. I think the NBA is still full. There's plenty of former players that are in there, and there's plenty of guys that kind of work their way up through, being a PR person. But most of the coaches are coaching lifers who have spent too many hours breaking down X and O's and breaking down the fundamentals and evaluating players. Coach mentioned drafting 5-star. You weren't just given a team typically. You had to draft, and you were lucky that Bob Gibbons drafted you. I once had Konchowski draft for me, the most famous scout of all time, a New York City guy. That made a difference. So think about this, Coach. We were with young players. I started coaching in the 80s. You're just a little bit older than me. So talk to me about.
Oh, come on, 81. I ain't that old now. 81 was my first high school team. So, man, you make me feel like
I was still in high school in 81, Coach. So,
I got
we're not too much different. But how do you look at the way players have changed back when you first started coaching them, then you started recruiting them in the 90s into what we see now? Both good and not so good. Like, what do you see the differences in the players themselves?
Well, to be quite frank with you, I don't see a lot of difference in the players.
That's what I
said.
They
still want to be coached. They still want to be good. They have different ways they want to be coached nowadays, but they still want you to find a way to help them reach their goals and dreams. I mean, at the end of the day, the difference is the amount of minutia that's around them and all the different voices that they listen to that they don't even know who those people are. Social media, just the telephone in general has made it more difficult. I remember when I first got to the University of Miami in 1995. Coach Hamilton was a master of just having kids in his office and explaining life to them, and helping them learn how to grow and develop as not just players but as men. But in those days, if you call a kid and say, "Hey man, come by the office," or "Let's go over to the cafeteria and let's get lunch together and sit and talk for a little bit," they had to have a calling card or make a collect call to call somebody before you got to the meeting. They come over so you could sit and have some real quality time, and you could get a kid to the buy-in a lot quicker in a conversation. So now if I call a kid and say, "Hey man, come by the office, man, after your class today," by the time they get from class to my office or class to the cafeteria, they've had 15 conversations with somebody saying, "What's coach tripping on? What'd you do wrong?" Every conversation they've had is negative before they get to you where you look them in the eyes. And then when you finish, you may have had a great conversation, which probably has to take longer for you to get to the soul of their spirit, and then try to inspire their minds and get their head and their heart together. By the time they get to the elevator to go back down to go out into the parking lot to go back to the apartments or the dorm, what was wrong? What's coach's problem? You okay? And they've got all those same problems. So it takes a lot more time emotionally and a lot more meetings to get kids to really buy into what they got to do to get better. And so it's not the kids that has changed; it's all the noise around them, and then a lot of adults not being adults. There's a lot of, we had a player not too long ago. I'm not going to call anybody's dirty laundry out there, but the day he had his breakout game that looked like he was going to be an NBA player, his dad quit his job the next Monday. And so so we had a lot of people that they just want to get on, think their kids are going to take care of them. So I think that's what's changed. My dad never wanted me to take care of him. I've never wanted my children to take care of me. What you're seeing now is you're seeing parents wanting their kids to take care of them. And I think that puts a lot of stress. We do a lot of stuff. Coach Hamilton's one of the most progressive and proactive coaches in the country. And we've actually had to bring in somebody in the psychology department to work with our team where we used to be able to do that as just the coaches by ourselves. So now we've had to add to our coaching team to help us with our guys. When he talks to our guys, and we do it in a group, and they start talking about the pressures and the stresses they're under to be a basketball player, you'd be shocked the percentage of, and it's very high, that are struggling with pressure from their parents just about basketball. It's not about being a better human being or doing great academically or anything like that. It's just the stress they feel under them. And we've had this gentleman works with our guys on how to deal with that with their parents. And I think that's the biggest change over the 30 years I've been doing this. That to me, it's really sad because I didn't grow up in that kind of environment. My environment was my dad wanted me to be better than he was, and I wanted my kids to be better than I did. And so it's something you have to face because, and we've been pretty good at it because I think our kids have been able to succeed because we address all of it.
Well, you said a lot there, and I like the first thing you said right away because that's what I've been saying. Is that I don't like when people who don't really deal with teenagers every day, like we do, say that somehow kids are so different. I don't agree at all. I started coaching a little bit after you. My first team was '87 for a high school team. We had college-bound players that year, and I coached my son's team this year a little bit, and they all wanted to be coached and pushed and challenged, and they tended to say yes sir and no sir, and without even asking, because they knew they wanted to show respect to me, and you're no different. I tend to say the same thing back to them. If you don't do that, if you're a coach and you tend to be a bit of a jerk, well then maybe they'll be a little less willing to still listen. And I actually like that. You're a father of you have a boy and girl just like I do. Yours are grown. I've not taught my kids to automatically respect their elders to the point where you just do whatever they say. You're allowed to be mindful of, well, wait a second, what they're telling me is really scary, or it just doesn't sound right, and just respectfully move on. So I think that's something that we've seen different in kids. They're not just going to follow you as a coach, Stan, if you act like what you're teaching is more important for you than them. They've got to know you're buying into them, right?
No question. I would say this though, that I do think the one thing that has changed a little bit in the players, and again, I do think it's a direct correlation with the adults around them, is the value placed on winning is not very deep down in the soul of players. We were very fortunate. Our team at Florida State this year, we had a group of guys that winning was important to them, which was kind of very refreshing. They could be very happy as long as they won. It didn't matter how their statistics were that game, where that's not always the case when you get a team. And they really won. They were more disappointed about not getting to compete than they were anything else at the end of the year. They really wanted to see if they could win and see how far the ACC tournament and the NCAA tournament might take them. But again, I think that's a reflection on the adults around them from some of their coaches. I think sometimes even the high school coaches, we always want to say it's the travel team coaches that mess it up, but I also think sometimes the high school coaches are just giving in instead of building that culture of let's work together to win something. You don't see that. I think you see it all the way to the NBA. I think you're seeing that through the little Jordan thing that's coming out right now is, when Jordan and them got knocked out by the Pistons, they got back together and figured out how they could get better because they knew they had to figure out how to beat the Pistons, and the Pistons had to figure out how to beat the Celtics. And even the NBA nowadays, you don't really see teams like that their core stays together and says, we're going to get over the hump to be this championship team. We'll just kind of do what we do that didn't travel ball. We'll just change teams and go somewhere else and play with another group of guys and see if it works out there. And I hate that because I think that losing that competitive drive is hurting not just basketball, but it's hurting our country.
I think when you and I both are very familiar with AAU basketball and all the negative knocks and there are some positives, I believe high school coaches tend to be just the same. You've got really amazing ones, and you've got guys you really wish wouldn't be coaching young people. The number of games is what you're talking about. There is an exhaustion of trying to win when you're just playing 100 games a year, which is not an exaggeration. That's what many of these guys are doing. So there's just always another game to go play. And what you said is right. If it's not working out here, I'll just go somewhere else. And which is why you see the transfer portals as big. In fact, before you came on, I said Florida State's one of the lucky ones. You guys, I haven't mentioned how good your team was. I think in the last two polls, you're like 4th and 5th in the country,
Yep.
right? I actually took my family to see your final game. You won the ACC League Championship, led by an amazing senior, but also a freshman, a sophomore that both can be top 20 picks this year.
Yeah.
So you guys were legitimate. I mean, I thought you could have won the national championship. I'm sure you feel the same. And I want to get to that in a minute. But with that rarity of everyone buying in, right? That is something I know you guys have tried to coach the same most years. You haven't always had that. Agreed?
Right. Oh, no
Yeah.
question. I mean, it's hard. It's probably the most fragile thing you have to do in coaching. And I tell all the young coaches and the GAs that work in our program, I said the hardest thing to do is to get your kids to have chemistry and be on the same page. That's coaching nowadays, more so than the X and O's or the skill development. And a lot of people don't want to take that challenge on.
So the NBA has that same issue. I remember talking to Scotty Brooks. Scotty took over 2 interim games for the Kings when Musselman got a DUI. So he was suspended 2 games. So Scotty took over. Before both games, he called me just for some thoughts about the game, whatever. And after it was done, we talked about some of the players. And he made the comment that I don't even coach those guys. I just play them. His point was those guys already get it. I've got to coach the other guys who don't get it. And I think in the NBA, when you have that, when everyone just wants to win and are willing, and this is something as you know, you've had 14 players drafted at Florida State. How many did you have at Miami?
That I coached, there was 3. John Salmons, 3. James Jones, Tim James that I coached.
Right, that's what I thought. 3 when you were there too. So it's 17 guys. And so if they're always worried about it, Jarod, this is something that players say all the time at the NBA level and at the college level and in AAU. Coach doesn't let me do my thing. He's not letting me play my game. And when I hear that, I tend not to hear too much because by the time they get to me, they figured out nobody cares about your game unless you're drafted top 10. How are you helping them win? Because if you're helping them win, you can slowly start adding to your game, provided you do the other stuff, defense, rebound, whatever, pass to the post or whatever, to make sure your team is winning. If you're not doing that, nobody cares. Right? You have to win games. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, no question. And I think that's one thing that our players are getting some value in the NBA front offices for is the guys we've had drafted lately have kind of come into the league and they've been able to fit into an organization and impact winning from, Jonathan Isaac, Malik Beasley, and now Fiondu Kabengele and Terrence Mann last year. I actually had a front office guy who was calling, doing some background. That's not a guy I've met him. It's not somebody that I'm personally connected with. And he made the comment to me the other day. He says it's starting to get around the league that if there's a Florida State player available at your pick, you should just take them because they're going to figure out a way to find a role and they're going to be able to be successful in the role because the way you guys have developed your program here in the last 5 or 6 years and get kids to understand what's important about life. And, I tell this all the time to people. I tell our players this the first day they show up on campus, I'm going to tell them my number one job as your coach is to continually define reality. And it gets to the point where I can't continue to define reality and eventually get kids to understand what's the truth in life. That's the time I'm going to hang it up and go into retirement because you still, at the end of the day, I tell kids all the time, you may not like what I'm going to tell you, but at the end of the day, you're going to come back and say, Coach, you were the only guy telling me the truth. And I want to have that relationship with you where we may butt heads a little bit while you're on the court and I'm on the court. And then when it's over and we're just lifetime friends, I want to have that relationship with you. You can always know you can count on me to be truthful with you. And so that's kind of, but the one thing I think that's helped us be successful is we really gotten to the point to add into our program along with developing our offensive and defensive systems is we've got to the point where we really try to craft a plan for every player on our team, all the way down to our non-scholarship guys. Where do you want to get to? What are your talents? We talk about it. We try to be proactive and talk and meet with their parents about it before seasons start. We talk about time frames. And so our guys, now you throw the psychological component in it with the doctor we've brought in. We talk about individually what we're going to do. Because I tell people in life, when you're in a team, everybody's still listening to one radio station. And I always call it the call letters are WIIFM, what's in it for me. So even if you're winning, you got to listen to what's in it for me. So if the kids know that they are working on something for me, they'll buy in and work in for something what's good for all of us. And so that and it takes a lot of time. When you ask what's the difference in coaching nowadays from back in the 80s and 90s, is for coaches, it's the time. I mean, you have to spend a lot of time in meetings with kids, with crafting things and meeting as your staff. And so it takes a lot more away from what could be your personal time, because it's just so much more compressed. But I think you have to do it if you're going to sustain success and you're going to sustain accountability and responsibility to your players.
Oh, right. So you're not just, coaches know how to market themselves in their program. You're preaching the truth. I looked up your team stats today. Your leading scorer, this is a top 5 team in the country. Your leading scorer, who in a mock draft yesterday was going number 11 to the Spurs, one of the mock drafts that are out there, Devin Vassell, he averaged 12.7 points a game. You only had 3 guys that averaged double figures. And you had 7 guys playing 19 or more minutes. That is not what you would think is going on. And yet you still are recruiting NBA prospects. You got a guy coming this coming year that's going to be probably a lottery pick in 2021. So when you talk about bringing in a psychologist for your team, and you talk about giving everyone a plan, Coach, you know this because I visited your team with my son. You guys built the kind of program I've always wanted my son to be a part of, right? We've talked about that. I watched your team. I watched guys that look like they could start for some teams, play 5 minutes and a half, and show genuine joy the entire time. So you're not just preaching something that sounds marketable. I've witnessed it. And again, the evidence is you're top 5 in the country with no one having the kind of season that you would think would earn a lottery pick, and yet you might have yourself a sophomore lottery pick. And by the way, how highly rated was Devin Vassell when you all got him?
Well, by the traditional thing with stars, I think he at best was found a few places. He was a 3-star. And I think his highest, when we offered him, I think his highest scholarship offer was like North Florida and Kennesaw State and Mercer. And a lot of people scoffed at him. Why are you going to go to an ACC program? But we try to believe with our eyes, with our experience on what we're doing. And I think you add on to Devin's story. You look at and you talk about our team. We're going back-to-back years with guys that have not started one game at Florida State and are going to be first-round draft picks. Fiondu Kabengele was in the green room last year, and for 2 years he didn't start and redshirted for a year, but he followed the plan and ended up being a first-round pick, and they're very high on him at the LA Clippers.
He was a lottery pick. Then, he went 14, right?
No, Fiondu ended up 27.
Oh, did he really? I thought, where did Terrence Mann
He
go?
was in the green room. Terrence Mann was 44, I think, in the second round. 43.
Both
with Fiondu got drafted by Brooklyn, but got traded to the Clippers on draft night. They drafted him as part of the trade.
Right.
And then this year, Patrick Williams, who was a freshman, he followed the plan, bought into it, and he could have gone some other places, but he still made the ACC All-Rookie team. He's the ACC Sixth Man of the Year, and he'll be somewhere in the top 20.
Yeah.
And who knows where he's going to fall in place at this point? Who even knows when the draft's going to be? But he was ecstatic, and his teammates were ecstatic about him being the Sixth Man of the Year. So it's kind of like the old Boston Celtics. We're kind of getting a little bit of a marketing plan for lack of a better term, for guys that, hey, this means something at Florida State.
But how do you do it? How do you get? I mean, we all need to get people we work with to buy in, right? So what have you found to be the secret to get that kind of buy-in, especially considering you can't offer like at a lot of schools, you can't offer 25 points per game as an average or 38 minutes. No one's playing that much. I think you had one player, your senior Trent Forrest, who could get drafted this year, and to me is going to be an NBA player. I think you led your team with 30.9 minutes per game. So how are you getting that buy-in without rewarding of playing time and scoring, which is typically how college coaches get that done?
Well, again, we make it an educational process. I mean, we sit down with our whole group in the summer, and we talk about the PER, player efficiency rating, that how the NBA does things per 36 minutes, I think, 36. In the NBA. We just kind of combine it per 40 for the college, and we talk about how this all works, and we talk about the whole rosters of the NBA and how NBA teams are usually formed. And if you really want to play in the NBA, I mean, it's almost like a classroom for us. It's as big a part of summer development as it is getting on the court and working on skills and schemes. And in terms of guys, you will be okay if you can get to this part of production in this amount of time. And the term we like to use is not really the whole truth thing, but we use is don't put bad film out there. So a lot of players lose their draft stock because of a bad film. In fact, yesterday, it was actually one of our former players who's a front office executive now. He sent me a text. He said, Devin wasn't supposed to help over this far, was he? Because they're scrutinizing everything down as he just played North Carolina. And I had to scout for North Carolina. I said, actually, he was supposed to do what he just did that because this. And I explained to White. He said, I'm glad I got an insight because I was going to kind of check him off that he overhelped and did too much. I said, well, that was a scouting report thing that he was following to the letter of the law. So when you got guys in that level that they're asking you personal questions, it also helps your players with the number of people that are in the business that are either connected to us as ex-players or ex-student staff members or even ex-colleagues that are working in the league. I mean, we try to get legit information for our guys, not just we think this, but we'll call people and say, where's our guy literally on your board? What are his deficiencies? What do we have to avoid him from? What do we have to try to promote for him? And that all goes into our plan of how we try to develop our guys. And we've been great. We've had great families that have let us coach them, and we've had great kids that have let us coach them. And coaching nowadays is more so than just going out there and doing the drills or the scouting reports in practice. It's coaching their minds. And Coach Hamilton says this to our staff all the time, that we have to coach their minds more than we coach our bodies nowadays. And so we spend a whole lot of time talking about this with our whole group and letting them know how the best possible path to get to the NBA and give yourself a chance is through understanding statistical analysis, using your skills, playing to your strengths, and showing you can play a great role in college will allow you to have a chance to get on a roster in the NBA. Now it's on you to see if you can get the second, third contract and understand the game. We're still going to be here to help you with it. But the key, and I tell all our guys, the key to the NBA is, key to life is if you get in the NBA, if you get drafted or you get a rookie free agent contract, if you don't get a second contract, you will have to have another job in life, whether you like it or not. And so we work on our guys. Let's try to have a plan for how we get a second contract and hopefully a third contract. Then you can decide if you want to work or not when your knees won't let you jump anymore.
Right. So you coached in the 80s in high school. Coach Ham was coaching in the 70s. We had Dwayne Casey on here a couple weeks ago, and he coached Dwayne in college at Kentucky.
Coach was in John Wooden's last game.
Really?
People don't really know that. Coach was on the bench for Kentucky in John Wooden's last game in 1975.
So now you understand the context of my question here. How is it that you guys have embraced load management as well as you have, when really even people younger than you still argue with the idea? Because I talked to Coach Hamilton about this. Like, you've got to take care of their bodies. You're asking a lot from them. Part of it's because you play so many players. That helps a great deal. But I know it matters to you. When did that change for you guys when you realized, you know what, we could ask less of our guys. They'll give us much more when they play.
Well, that's a great question. I'm not sure exactly where the pivot point was on that, but I think Coach, one thing that happened is Coach about lost his coaching career down at the University of Miami because of a lot of injuries that kept his program from making a jump quicker when he was the head coach at the University of Miami. I mean, he lost Steve Edwards, he lost Steve Frazier, he lost Steve Rich, all on freak injury stuff. And he started that with realizing that he had a problem with how things were going in the weight room. And so he started researching the weight room and started looking for the kind of program that he felt was more conducive for basketball players' bodies and for their development so that they don't overtax their knees, their shoulders, their low back, and those kind of things. And they were starting for crazy reasons of popping out and limiting guys' ability to have pro careers. So because Coach Hamilton's he's not just a 4-year coach, he's a life coach of these guys. Yeah. We started seeing a lot of guys. I mean, Constantine Popa, if you'll remember, probably should have played in the NBA. I didn't coach Constantine, but probably should have played in the NBA because his skills were relevant at that time. But when he left coach, which was a year before I got there, he started training with some super trainer, whatever deal, and ended up they put a disc in his back. And he got drafted and never had a chance to make the NBA because of the training they were doing for pre-draft, and so Coach put all that in there and he started crafting this. I can't let this happen to anybody else in the future because Popa should have made money playing in the league and didn't get to do it because of how we were challenging their bodies. So it started in the weight room, and then it's just evolved up from also going back to seeing how much these kids played while they were in high school.
Right.
And if you go back and you think about it, even I think he stole a little bit from Bobby Bowden when we first got to Florida State. When Bobby Bowden had those great football teams, I mean, they rotated guys, running backs, linebackers, linemen. They rotated guys, not just because they had talent, but they rotated them because they could have longer careers in the NFL by not beating them down while they were in college. And so I think that added on to Coach Hamilton's idea, and I think it really pays off because John Salmons, who played for us, ended up with 13 years in the league. James Jones played 14 years in the league. Al Thornton, who should have played in the league longer, he's still playing internationally.
Yeah.
And he left us in 2007. Tony Douglas is still playing after 8 years in the NBA. And most of our guys that have followed the protocol are able to play much longer and to put much more financial opportunities in their bank for them because we didn't beat their bodies down. I think Bob Sura came in when we first took the job and saw our strength coach Mike Bradley working with one of our guys. And he had hurt his back in college, lifting the way that they were lifting at the time. And he told our strength coach, he said, if I'd have lifted this way when I was in college, I'd have got 3 or 4 more years out of my NBA career. So all those things have just added on to Coach's philosophy anyway, that he wants to see these kids taken care of for life. So we factored into it. And again, we talk about it. And that's not something that we try to keep secretive with our players. We want them to understand where we're coming from because I think players trust you if you're transparent with them and not just saying, hey, just blindly trust me and this will all work out. We want them to all be in the process with us together. And we talk about it when we have our strength coach and all our coaching staff on the same page. And it makes a world of difference.
So you've seen a lot of amazing players, and you and I have talked about a lot of these amazing players. I remember you called me one time. You had seen Brett Nelson play. You ended up playing for the Gators, and you reacted in a way that you normally don't react because you've seen so much talent. But he really kind of gave you a pep in your step at what you saw from him. And he was great for 2 years at Florida. Then he didn't do so well. He was McDonald's All-American. But who are some guys you've seen, not including Seminoles, that you just really kind of took your breath away? Just like, wow. Do you remember some guys that really did that to you?
Well, I still to this day, the first guy the best guy I've ever seen play in high school basketball. I wasn't in coaching in college at the time, but Chris Jackson, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf in high school.
I saw him too.
Absolutely the most impressive high school player I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it was just stunning. He would just take, if you were coaching, I was coaching against him in an AAU game in Mississippi.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's like, you couldn't even coach the game because it was so you were just mesmerized by watching what he could do with the basketball and with his team and how he played the game, and just the fluid, effortless skill he had that he could get to anywhere on the floor and do whatever he wanted to do with this incredible grace about himself and graceful athleticism. It wasn't like he was just moving smoothly. I mean, he'd get somewhere smoothly and then rise up over the top of you at 6'2", and wasn't nothing you could do about it. And so that was the guy that first got home about, ooh, that really is a pro right there. And it's a shame people don't know more about what his story was about. But he's one. But there's a whole long list of guys. The worst part of it is the list of guys that, in the recruiting process that we've recruited that we've messed up because we didn't value them well enough. There are some stories I could tell you right now that I don't know if I want to put all our business of guys that we could have had if we'd have moved on them early.
You give us one. Give us one that you could have had, you think, that ended up being really good. Everyone's got these stories, Coach.
I can tell you the first one was a guy named Stevie Francis who would have he was going to commit to us on the next. We had a visit scheduled for one weekend with a guard, and he was coming the next weekend. Stevie Francis was best friends with Kevin Norris and Johnny Hemsley, who were playing for us at the University of Miami at the time, and had already told him, if I have a good visit, I'm committing and coming with you fellas. We had another guard that I'm not going to call his name that committed the weekend before, and Coach, being the loyal guy he was, said, if you commit, I'll cancel all the other guys' visits. And we canceled Stevie Francis' visit the next weekend. And the other guy, you wouldn't remember his name as a player either in college or in the pros because he didn't do well in either one of them. He didn't see one of them, and he didn't do much in college.
So I would tell you that I saw Chris Jackson his freshman year. I was in Gainesville for a tournament for my high school team at Dixie Hollins, and we happened to go catch LSU play Florida. We were invited to go because we had some good players, and he gave him 50. I saw a 50-point game in college on the road, and he was kind of a mixture of Steph Curry with like Kyrie handles.
Yeah,
for that.
That's a
age.
great evaluation.
Yeah, amazing, deep range, fearless. But I'll tell you Stevie Francis story. So he came to train with me after he retired. And he had been out for like a year or two. And I thought, why is he coming here? So he came down. And I'm telling you, Coach, he was one of the most athletic players at that day. And I've seen everyone. I live in Florida. So Vince Carter, I saw when he was 15. As you know all the talent here. I could not believe when I witnessed this guy. And he was done. I can't even imagine what he was like in person in his prime. But what an athlete. He was just one of those guys. Has there been other guys that have surprised you that you saw them, even in college, you're coaching the ACC like you do, that made it to the NBA and ended up being much better than you probably projected they would have been?
Boy, that's a on the spot question right there. That's
I know there's a lot of guys you've seen. If you can't think of that, I want to get your opinions on a couple of things, and then Jarod's going to have a question or two for you, and then we'll be done. I know you were very high on Zion. Clearly, you knew he had to get better. Did he end up playing how you thought, or did you not watch him very much because you were busy with your own team?
You know, he missed so much of the season. I really didn't get to see a whole lot of that time. You know, and sometimes in the NBA, the only NBA I watch nowadays is when our guys are playing. I kind of watch them and kind of see what they're doing. So I don't really get a lot of time just to sit and be a fan. And people always ask me who you're going to cheer for, and I'm going to say whatever team my guys are playing on. I don't cheer for teams anymore.
What about when you prepared for Zion though? You played him twice this last season. A season ago. So what did you do? What was your scouting report on him?
Well, obviously we were going to try to make him be on the perimeter as much as we could. We wanted him to try to take tough twos off the bounce as much as we could, because he could make a standstill if you gave him plenty of time to make a standstill three. But if you let him get beyond, and we would really what we call shrink gaps, at least 50% off of him, and try to make sure he didn't see many floorboards for him to create off of. And then, you know, the other big part of him was keeping him off the offensive glass, which was not an easy thing to do. So we would try to send a block out guy off of whoever their get back guys were. We would try to, you know, your job is to go find Zion and try to put a second body on him. And then the third thing that people forget of how good he was unbelievably good in college defensively, especially in passing lane anticipation. And so we were very cognizant of let's not have open court turnovers. And if you're in his gap, you need to be thinking in our system, you need to be thinking taking the backdoor option and trying to make him chase side to side and not just making the slow to quick cuts on your strong side, and allowing his timing and his athleticism to become a big factor in terms of that. And we did a really good job for that until the second half of the ACC championship game. And he made 2 or 3 steals that led to kind of broke our back when we had a lead at halftime. But he was just so good at that. The thing that I was so impressed with Zion that I think is going to translate in the NBA is, you know, when we lost to them in the ACC championship game and the confetti's coming down and their team kind of went out on the court running and celebrate like you should do as a team.
Yeah.
You know, the first thing he did was he came to the sideline and shook all of our guys' hands legitimately with sincerity and congratulated our guys before he went and celebrated with his teammates, which tells me that there's quite a bit of character down inside of his heart.
You and Michael Jordan would both agree on that for sure, because he's been bitching about how Isaiah handled it. So, you know, two of the guys that most people think are going top 2 this year, or 2 of the top 3, I should say, in the draft, is the Weissman kid, James Weissman, and Anthony Edwards from Georgia. I know you're intimate, you know, pretty both of them kind of intimately. What's your thoughts on both of them as projecting for the NBA?
Well, if James, who we recruited and we came very close to getting a commitment from at the University at Florida State University, he's a great talent. I kind of compare him to a combination of Amari Stoudemire athletically and a little bit of Chris Bosh offensively.
Wow!
And so he's a great kid. He's incredibly intelligent. I mean, he speaks a whole lot of languages. He speaks Mandarin Chinese. I mean, he thinks globally. I mean, he learned Mandarin Chinese because he realized that's a big market and wanted to start having that ability to use those skills. So he thinks differently as a high school kid, very mature in that area. Hated that he got caught up in a situation where people couldn't see him play this year, because he would have made Memphis a legitimate top 10 possible Final Four team, because he is unbelievably long, very coachable. he would have fit in fantastic in our system. I think we would have used him at a level that would have really highlighted all that he can do with the style of defense we play and the spread offense that we're playing and the speed we're playing with. He didn't have enough time to see what he would have fit in with what this coaching staff at Memphis was going to do this year with what went down. But I think he'll be with the right team that's going to play with a rim runner and a guy that can effectively short roll and pick and pop a little bit. He's going to be able to use all those skills in development. So I don't think he's a big risk for anybody taken early in the draft. I don't think there's a lot of things other than he's really young. And that's going to be a risk for every kid nowadays because they're going to take all the young guys. But because of his intelligence, because of the incredible athleticism that he has, I think he'll be a guy that figures things out and becomes very effective as at worst being a starting five, and however you want to quote the fives in the NBA. But he'll be a starter for somebody, and potentially if he gets in the right kind of situation. And you and I talk about this a lot in the NBA. Your success, unless you're just one of the transcendent talents of all time, is the roster you get on and the coach you play for, because things have to all those things have to connect. But he should be that guy. Anthony Edwards, incredible high school talent, incredible talent at Georgia this year with the ball in his hand. He concerns me a little bit for the NBA of being like, if you remember the name Malik Newman, who came out with the same fanfare in high school and stuff. He's just a little smaller than what Anthony Edwards is. I'm not sure what he does impacting the game when the ball's not in his hand. And as you know, as much as you study and cover the NBA, ball dominant people coming in tend to get very frustrated in their early years in the NBA. Now, can he transfer that and be a guy that can figure those things out? That's going to be the do or die question, I think, for Edwards to have a chance to be a star player. If he does, his ability to go with the ball and put it in the basket will give him a chance to be he's got a Mitch Richmond type body. If he fills out, he's a hard worker with those kind of things, and he'll learn to get out and transition and stuff like Mitch did. But right now he's got to get where he can't just stand out there and wait for somebody to give him the ball and just get out of the way and let him go ISO ball or high ball screen just for him. And the ball screen he thinks just for him instead of realizing there's a lot of options for four other people when you play ball screen basketball. So I think that's going to be a question that the people are going to have to decide if they're going to just take a shot on his talent or they're going to take a shot on will he have the wherewithal to adapt to those situations for an NBA team.
Yeah, I wrote about him maybe a month or two ago. I have the same concerns. I didn't know much about Weissman because I couldn't watch film, but I'm intrigued with his intelligence. Is probably I think passing is underrated. Intelligence is underrated. Just you said, be able to figure stuff out. Chris Paul is a genius. James Harden's a genius. LeBron, these are geniuses.
Yep.
And they figure stuff out, and it makes your job as a coach much easier when they're figuring stuff out on the court, and you're just making sure you summon guys in, whatever. But that's enormously helpful. So, Coach, our last thing, we always have Jarod on asking a question. He's a knowledgeable man about a lot of things. Coach, jump in there, and Jarod, jump in there and ask something to Coach Jones.
Thanks, Coach Thorpe. Coach Jones, this was incredible. A lot of good insight here from you. Something you mentioned earlier, and I know it's something that Coach Thorpe shares. You see the humanity in your players, right? I mean, that's the big thing, is that while they perform this skill for you, they're also people. And I'm curious, obviously, you get lucky when you have athletes that come in who are fortunate to have parents like Coach Thorpe and his wife who are amazing and who just want the best for their kids and don't want anything from them. But a lot of times that's just not the case, right? You've got poor circumstances. What are those conversations like when you want a kid to trust you and the kid's already got trust issues from home, and now I've got to convince you that this is my ticket to get to pay and take care of my family, but you're telling me I can't do this? What are those conversations like?
Well, a lot of those conversations happen for us in the recruiting process. We've gotten very, very deliberate in our conversations and recruiting with not just the player trying to build a relationship with the prospect, but asking questions to the parents so we can kind of dive as deep as we can. And you're not going to ever be 100% on that, but we've gotten to the point where we really want to coach kids that we want to enjoy coaching. Taking kids on just where they're ranked or their potential. It's gotten to the point in our careers now. David keeps alluding to how old I am, but I don't like walking out of the I don't like walking out of the practice court and saying, "Man, I wish I didn't have to deal with that guy today." I like walking out there and saying, man, hey, he was great today. I can't wait till we get back tomorrow. He's really getting it figured out. And that's important for coaches as well as it is for players. So the way we've been playing and the success we've been having and the success our guys have been having beyond Florida State, we're having people reach out to us about any prospect you can think of that's on a recruiting board somewhere. Somebody, a coach or a parent or somebody in their community is reaching out, wanting to know if we'd be interested. And, we're asking poignant questions early about certain things. And if they say things about, well, they're just worried about how, what about this? Why can't, that kind of stuff. We just kind of move on. And we want to find guys that we think fit what we call, we're kind of taking pride in, we want people that are a Florida State player. And we have people that are calling and saying, this guy looks and acts like a Florida State player. And we take pride in that brand because, it says a lot about the character of our kids. And that's important. And as I go through this with the NBA people, Jarod, I keep telling the guys we've had going to the NBA, they've all had a crazy mix of character and humility, but they all have a great competitive streak. And when you put those three things together, I think you have guys that can be terrific for not just for Florida State, but they can be terrific at the next level because they can handle the locker room, they can handle the corporate room, they can handle the community, and they can handle the negotiations that go on and the tough things that go on because they have that ability to represent themselves without being all about themselves. And so we really have taken time. And we got 2 scholarships open right now. We've had a lot of people we could have pulled the trigger on quick, but we want to make sure we don't mess up our locker room because we have such a strong culture. I hate to everybody uses the word culture nowadays, but our locker room chemistry is so strong right now that we don't want anything to disrupt that, or it doesn't have the ability to come in right away and adapt into it.
But that's an incredible position to have, though, right? So many coaches and programs don't want to do that. If I got a chance at a 5-star, to hell with whatever's going on, I got to take that guy, right? But what you said also earlier was also key. You manage expectations as they go up, right? Because everybody who is going to play college basketball at one time was a star high school player, right? But it narrows the further you okay, you may have been there, but you're not at this level, and you may not be a star at the NBA level. So I think it's incredible what you and Coach Hamilton have done with your program. Really, really kudos. Great job.
Well, thank you for saying that. And, again, it goes back to that term I said about defining reality, because there is a lot of people that, I think I saw something, everybody's asking questions about the G League path that they're trying to put in now. And I think I saw an anonymous NBA executive said, the problem is now you're going to have 500 kids that are sophomores and juniors in high school that think that's the way that they're all going to be able to do that. And so you got to be able to define people that you can't allow yourself to get into a delusion that it's just going to happen because you want it to. You have to have a business plan for basketball, even though we're still playing a simple game. You still have to have a business plan, and you have to work the plan to have a chance to get where you want to get to. And a lot of people that don't come out of those kind of environments, they don't always get that. And I think that's what allows Coach Hamilton to be such a unique leader in our businesses, and along with the rest of our staff. I mean, we've got a very experienced staff that we really sit and talk about those things. And if it looks like people aren't getting it, we're not afraid to cut our losses and move on. We just wish them well, and let's find people that really want to be about doing this the right way.
Coach, I really appreciate your time. And Jarod, thank you. I want to finish with this one thought. We value at TrueHoop, we value the truth. We also value culture. I know it's a cliche, as you mentioned, but it's an important word for us. It's something we talk a lot about. I wrote something a couple of years ago where I copied it from somewhere else, is saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And having witnessed the culture, you have strategy too, but your culture is what's put Florida State, which was never a basketball school, into a place where you guys are now competing every year now for ACC and national championships. So it comes from a great coaching staff, like you say, who values the right things. And I'm in the business of helping young people, and so are you guys. So we appreciate that. Coach, thank you for your time. Stay safe, please, and keep your family safe. I know they're all with you in Tallahassee, and you and I'll catch up soon, okay?
Thank you for asking me, and it's great to always be with you. And I love that little thing right there. I actually you'll steal this line. I read a book of a military leader this year, and one of the things they do in the military is they say recruit attitude, develop skill. And we've kind of added that as one of a mantra for us, is we're trying to recruit attitude, and we think we'll develop their skills. So you can steal that one from me as well.
Oh, I will. All right, be good. We're back tomorrow, 11 o'clock. Well, thanks for joining us and bringing it in. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care.
Okay, guys.
Take care, guys.
Be blessed.